All right, let's dive into today's news. We're going to sort through the overnight headlines and, figure out what really matters for you. We've got a bit of everything this time. Global economic predictions, ta-da. Some pretty big leadership shakeups, MEO, and yeah, you guessed it, some AI stuff too.
It's wild how these stories,
Yeah.
they seem totally different at first, but they all kind of point to the same big trends happening right now.
Yeah, those connections are always fascinating, aren't they? Okay, so the OECD is saying global growth will be around 3.3% for 2025 and 2026, which honestly sounds a bit underwhelming. Plus, they're talking about trade tensions and countries really struggling with their budgets. Should we be worried about this, like for our investments and stuff?
Well, the OECD specifically calls out places like France and the US where those budget deficits could cause problems down the road. So yeah, if you've got investments in those areas, it's worth keeping an eye on how things play out with their policies. And maybe think about diversifying your portfolio a bit.
Good point. Never hurts to spread the risk. Okay, so moving on to specific economies. The OECD thinks China's growth will slow down, hitting 4.4% by 2026. They say it's because of things like less consumer spending and their real estate market, having a rough time. But what does this actually mean for the rest of the world? China's a huge player, so their slowdown's got to have some impact.
Oh, absolutely. When China slows down, the whole global economy feels it. Think about it. If they buy less stuff, that impacts commodity prices. And if they import less, well, that affects the countries exporting to them. It's definitely something to watch closely, especially if your work or investments are tied to international markets.
It really shows how interconnected everything is. Okay, so China's facing some challenges, but the OECD is actually calling India a shining light for growth. What's their secret sauce? Why are they doing so well?
Well, India has a couple of things going for them. They've got a young and growing workforce, which is attractive to investors. Plus, their government has made some changes to make it easier to do business there. So yeah, they're becoming a pretty major player on the global stage.
Interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how things develop for them. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about these leadership changes happening. Jerome Powell, the Fed chair in the U.S., is trying to reassure everyone that the Fed will stay independent, even with the incoming Trump administration, known for wanting to exert influence.
Yeah, Powell's comments are definitely interesting considering Trump's, well, reputation. This whole power dynamic between them could have a huge impact, not just on the U.S. economy, but on global markets as well.
Yeah, especially since Trump just nominated Paul Atkins to lead the SEC. And Atkins is known for wanting fewer regulations and a more pro-business approach. How do you think this will shake things up, particularly for industries like crypto, which have been under a lot of scrutiny lately?
Well, with Atkins at the helm, the SEC could look very different. We might see less enforcement and a more relaxed environment, which could be good news for sectors like crypto that have faced a lot of regulatory hurdles.
Seems like we're heading into a pretty uncertain time in the financial world. And the drama isn't just in the U.S. Over in South Korea, President Yoon Suk-yeol is facing impeachment after declaring martial law, which caused a ton of backlash.
Yeah, Yoon's actions basically triggered a constitutional crisis. It really shows how fragile even well-established democracies can be and how important those checks and balances are. When they break down, things can get messy fast.
It definitely makes you think twice about taking political stability for granted. Okay, before we jump into corporate news, I need a minute to process all this political stuff. What are your initial thoughts on these leadership changes? Like, what kind of ripple effects do you see happening?
What strikes me is just how much uncertainty and volatility these changes bring. We're seeing a realignment of power both within countries and on the global stage, and the consequences of that could be pretty significant.
Yeah, you're right. A lot to unpack there. All right, let's move on to corporate news. Unfortunately, we'll start with some sad news. Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, was killed in a targeted attack outside his hotel in New York City.
Oh, wow, that's awful. It's a stark reminder of the risks that people in high-profile positions face. The investigation is still ongoing, but the fact that it was targeted raises a lot of questions and really underscores the need for security for people in positions of power.
It's a terrible situation, and hopefully we'll learn more as the investigation unfolds. Shifting gears a bit, General Motors announced a big financial hit in China. They're writing down billions of dollars because their sales have plummeted there. What do you think this says about the challenges facing global companies in China, especially as the market there is changing so rapidly?
Well, it definitely shows how competitive the Chinese market has become. You've got strong domestic automakers, and the government is also shifting towards favoring local businesses. Global companies operating in China really need to adapt their strategies if they want to stay in the game.
It's adapt or die, basically, especially in a dynamic market like China. All right, let's end on a more positive note. Salesforce is actually doing incredibly well. Their earnings are way up, their stock is soaring, and it seems like a lot of their success is being driven by their AI platform.
Yeah, Salesforce is a great example of how powerful AI can be across different sectors. Their platform uses AI to automate sales processes, personalize customer interactions, and just generally improve efficiency. It's proof that when businesses embrace AI, they can get real, tangible results.
It feels like AI is finally moving beyond just being a cool concept to actually having a real impact on how businesses operate. Speaking of AI, Apple and Baidu are trying to combine their AI powers, but they've hit a snag because of, you guessed it, privacy concerns.
This is such a classic example of the tension between innovation and data protection. Apple, with their super strict privacy policies, is struggling to figure out how to work with Baidu, whose AI models need massive amounts of data to function properly. It'll be interesting to see how they manage to, find that balance.
It's like two titans clashing, and the outcome is anyone's guess. Okay, on that note, we're going to wrap up part one of our deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore even more news and insights that matter to you.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive. So we've looked at some of the big global stuff, but now let's bring things a little closer to home. What about the Australian economy? How's it looking amidst all these changes?
Oh, perfect timing. I was actually just wondering about that. What's the OECD saying about Australia's economic outlook?
Well, the OECD is predicting modest growth for Australia, around 1.9% in 2025 and then 2.5% in 2026. It's not terrible, but it is below Australia's long-term average. So, there are some potential headwinds coming up. This could affect things like job growth, wage increases,
Yeah.
even the cost of living.
Okay, so not a complete disaster, but definitely some things to watch out for. What's causing this more cautious outlook for Australia?
The OECD points to a couple of key factors. One is those global trade tensions we talked about earlier, and the rise of protectionist policies. That's creating a lot of uncertainty, especially for Australian businesses that rely on exports. And then there's the talk of potential U.S. tariff hikes, which could really impact things.
Yeah, that makes sense considering how much the global economy relies on trade. Are there any other factors contributing to this slowdown?
Yeah, the second one is Australia's housing market. It's been cooling down lately, and that can have ripple effects on consumer spending and overall economic activity.
So it's a mix of external pressures and internal adjustments impacting Australia.
Okay, so what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
Should I be panicking? Running to the bank?
No, no need to panic. But it's always a good idea to be prepared for economic ups and downs. Maybe take a look at your budget, see if you can diversify your income streams, or think about investment strategies that can weather those economic storms. Solid advice. It never hurts to be prepared, especially with so much uncertainty out there. All right, let's take a break from the economic doom and gloom for a sec. I want to talk about AI, something a bit more exciting.
Oh yeah, AI, it's everywhere these days. It's changing how businesses operate, leading to some amazing scientific breakthroughs.
Exactly. And one story that really blew my mind was about Google's GenCast AI model.
Hmm.
It's supposed to be revolutionizing weather forecasting with its accuracy.
Yeah, GenCast is pretty impressive stuff. It's a deep learning model trained on decades of weather data. It analyzes huge amounts of information and looks for patterns, allowing it to generate incredibly accurate weather predictions.
So it's like having a super-powered meteorologist in your pocket. But how accurate are we talking?
Well, GenCast can generate a 15-day weather forecast, and it's more accurate than traditional methods for over 97% of variables. And the crazy part, it does all this in just minutes.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, but what does this hyper-accurate weather forecasting actually mean for us? Like, what are the real-world applications?
Oh, the applications are huge. Farmers could use it to plan their planting and harvesting, reducing crop losses. Emergency responders could use it to prepare for extreme weather events, potentially saving lives and minimizing damage. And for the average person, well, we could all use more accurate weather info. Makes planning anything so much easier.
It's amazing how technology like this can transform entire sectors. Agriculture, disaster preparedness, even just our daily lives. It's a great example of AI being used for good. But while we're getting excited about all this tech, it's important to remember the human element in all this.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and trends and the tech itself.
Yeah,
But behind every headline, there's a human story.
exactly. Like we talked about earlier, the tragic death of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. It reminds us that even those in positions of power are vulnerable. We still don't know why he was targeted, but it highlights how fragile life is. and how important it is to cherish every moment.
Absolutely. It's easy to get lost in the analysis, but ultimately, every news story has a human impact.
It's a sobering reminder that amidst all the talk of economics and technology, we should never forget about the people at the heart of it all. We're all connected, and these events affect us all in different ways. Okay, I think that's a good place to pause for part two of our deep dive. We've covered some pretty heavy topics today, from global economics to leadership changes, and of course, the ever-evolving world of AI.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey through current events, exploring how all these seemingly separate events are actually shaping our world.
We'll be back soon for part three to wrap things up and leave you with some final food for thought. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about global economics, leadership changes, and of course, AI.
It's been a pretty wild ride, right?
Totally. So, we touched on the ethics of AI earlier, and it feels like we're on the verge of some really big breakthroughs. But are we maybe moving too fast?
Yeah, it's a question we need to be asking ourselves.
As AI gets more and more integrated into our lives, healthcare, finance, our phones, everything, we need to think about the risks, not just the benefits.
Exactly.
So let's play devil's advocate for a second. What are some of the potential downsides of AI that we should be wary of?
Well, one big concern is bias. AI algorithms learn from data, right? And if that data reflects existing biases in society, then the AI system can actually amplify those biases, leading to unfair or discriminatory outcomes. Think about things like hiring, lending, even criminal justice.
Wow, yeah, that's a scary thought. AI could actually make existing inequalities even worse.
It's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so bias is one potential risk. What else should we be thinking about?
Another issue is job displacement. As AI gets more sophisticated, it can automate tasks that humans used to do. This could lead to job losses in certain sectors and raises some big questions about how we adapt to a changing workforce, how to make sure everyone benefits from these technological advancements.
It's a balancing act, for sure. We want progress, but we don't want to leave people behind. Are there any other potential risks with AI that we haven't talked about?
Well, privacy is a big one. AI systems need tons of data to work properly. So how is that data being collected, stored, used? We need to make sure that the convenience and efficiency of AI doesn't come at the cost of our privacy and security.
So we've got bias, job displacement, and privacy concerns. But at the same time, AI has the potential to do so much good. How do we strike that balance? How do we harness the power of AI while minimizing those risks?
Honestly, it's one of the biggest challenges we face today. I think the most important thing is to have open and honest conversations about the ethics of AI. We need to develop guidelines and regulations to make sure AI is used responsibly, with transparency and accountability every step of the way.
So it sounds like we need a collaborative approach, bringing together experts from different fields, ethicists, policymakers, technologists, even the public. Everyone needs to be part of the conversation to create a framework for ethical AI development and use.
Exactly. It's not going to be easy, but it's absolutely essential if we want to make sure AI benefits society and helps create a better future for all of us.
Kind of said it better myself. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we go, we have one final thought for you, our listener. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, what role do you want to play? How will you ensure that AI is used for good to create a future that's innovative and equitable? Thanks for joining us on this journey through the news and ideas shaping our world. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.